Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. You guys sent in tons of articles about this one, and I'm excited to dig in to Boeing and their Starliner spacecraft. You know how everyone wants to go to space someday? Well, Starliner was supposed to be a big part of that.
It was supposed to be America's next big thing for space travel, getting astronauts up to the ISS and back.
But it's been a little bit of a bumpy ride, to say the least. So we'll get into all the ups and downs, the technical glitches, the money problems, and of course, we've got to talk about the competition, right? I mean, Boeing's not the only one in the space race anymore.
Oh yeah, SpaceX is definitely a major player here.
So this deep dive, we're going to look at all of it. To kick things off, let's rewind back to when this all began. Boeing snagged a massive contract from NASA, billions of dollars, to develop Starliner. And they did it under something called a fixed price contract. What's that all about?
So basically, a fixed price contract means Boeing gets a set amount of money no matter what happens.
That sounds pretty sweet for Boeing, right?
Well, in theory, yeah. But space travel is incredibly complex and expensive. And if you hit unexpected snags, costs can explode.
And Boeing, they've definitely hit a few snags, haven't they?
More than a few, for sure.
I mean, we're talking about rocket science here, not ordering a pizza. So when costs go way over that fixed price, what happens then?
That's where things get interesting. Because in this kind of contract, Boeing has to eat those extra costs themselves. And so far, they've lost over $1.85 billion on Starliner.
Wow, that's gotta hurt. And it sounds like those costs are still going up too.
Oh yeah, they definitely are.
Ouch, that's a big hit for any company, let alone one trying to build spaceships.
Definitely.
So it's not just about money though, right? We've all heard about some serious technical issues with Starliner, haven't we?
For sure. We're talking software glitches, problems with valves, even leaks.
Leaks, like what kind of leaks?
Helium leaks. And let me tell you, that's not something you want happening in space.
Oh, I bet not. Helium leaks in a spacecraft, that sounds terrifying. And didn't those leaks actually cause delays with a recent test flight?
They did, yeah. And delays are a huge deal in spaceflight. It's not just pushing back a launch date. You've got to think about the astronauts, their training, the experiments, everything.
Right, it throws off the entire schedule. It's a good reminder that space travel, even with all our technology, is still risky and complicated. But hold on a second. Wasn't Starliner supposed to be part of a bigger plan? Didn't NASA want two companies sending crews to the ISS?
Right, they wanted Boeing and SpaceX both developing spacecraft. The idea was to have redundancy, backup system, plus competition, which theoretically would lower costs and make things move faster.
So it's like if one company's spaceship is out of commission, the other one can step up.
Exactly.
Smart thinking, but here's the thing. It kind of seems like Starliner's problems have actually helped SpaceX, haven't they?
They have. SpaceX has really stepped up, launching astronauts to the ISS on their Dragon spacecraft without many problems.
So while Boeing struggles, SpaceX looks more and more reliable.
So instead of more competition, we could end up with a SpaceX monopoly. That raises a whole bunch of questions about how this all plays out.
It does, and it puts NASA in a tough spot. They were betting on two companies to keep things moving forward, and now it looks like they might only have one reliable option.
And that's got to have consequences, right? I mean, SpaceX can't just call all the shots now, can they?
Well, imagine you're NASA. You've got this incredible space station, experiments going on, astronauts to get up there, and only one company can do it for you.
That gives SpaceX a lot of power in any negotiations.
It's a lot of power, yeah.
That's what you mean. Okay, but hasn't Boeing's new CEO, Kelly Ortberg, been talking about shaking things up? What's he saying about Starliner?
He's been saying Boeing needs to streamline, do less, but do it better. But he's been pretty vague about what that means for Starliner specifically. So we're left with a lot of what-ifs then. What are the most likely scenarios here?
Well, the big questions are, do they scrap Starliner completely, try to renegotiate the deal with NASA, or do they just push forward and try to fix all the problems?
Those are some big questions with big consequences, not just for Boeing, but for the whole future of space travel.
Absolutely.
To really understand those consequences, we need to look at each of those possibilities more closely. All right, so we've got these three big what-ifs about Starliner's future. Let's start with the most extreme one. Boeing just gives up, scraps the whole program. What would that look like?
Well, financially, they'd have to write off billions of dollars in losses. Not a good day at the office.
Definitely not. But it would also free up money and resources for Boeing to focus on other stuff, like their airplane business, which hasn't been doing so hot lately either.
Yeah, that could be a smart business move for them.
But what about the big picture? Wouldn't Boeing dropping out be a big setback for NASA and their vision for commercial space travel?
It would be a blow, no doubt. Remember, NASA's whole idea was to get private companies leading the way in space. Having both Boeing and SpaceX in the game were supposed to create competition and drive innovation.
Yeah, like a rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. I remember reading that NASA was super excited about having two companies going head to head.
Exactly. They thought it would lead to lower costs and faster progress.
But now with Boeing potentially out of the picture, we're looking at a possible SpaceX monopoly. And monopolies historically haven't always been great for innovation or prices.
True. But let's play devil's advocate for a second.
Okay, hit me with it.
What if, just maybe, a SpaceX monopoly turns out to be a good thing?
Interesting.
I mean, SpaceX has been killing it lately. They've been reliable, innovative, consistently delivering on their promises.
They're like the cool kid in school. Everyone wants to be them.
Yeah, and without Boeing in the picture, they'd have even more resources and freedom to push the boundaries even further.
So maybe a SpaceX monopoly could actually accelerate progress in space. That's kind of a wild thought.
It is wild, but not impossible. They can invest more in research and development, maybe make breakthroughs in things like reusable rockets or even space tourism.
So there's a chance, a slim chance, that this could be a win for space exploration.
Maybe, but there are downsides to monopolies too. Less competition usually means less pressure to keep costs low and to maintain high safety standards. Plus, if something goes wrong with SpaceX, NASA would be left with no backup plan.
Right, it's all on SpaceX's shoulders then. That's a lot of pressure and a lot of risk. Okay, let's shift gears for a minute. What if Boeing decides to stay in the game, but they have to renegotiate their contract with NASA? What could that look like?
Well, it would definitely involve some tough conversations. They'd probably have to scale back their ambitions for Starliner, make it simpler and less expensive.
So instead of trying to be the ultimate spaceship, they focus on a more specific role,
Right, maybe just transporting cargo or doing certain types of experiments.
like finding their niche in the space market.
Exactly. But even with a new deal, they'd still need to prove to NASA that they can get their act together and deliver a reliable spacecraft.
It's a long road ahead for them. And that brings us to the third possibility. Boeing goes all in, doubles down on Starliner, and tries to fix all the problems. What are the biggest challenges there?
Time, for sure. The ISS isn't going to be around forever. They got a deadline to meet.
Tick-tock goes the clock.
Plus, they've already spent a ton of money.
Pouring more money into a struggling project might not be the best idea.
It's a gamble. They're betting they can fix everything, meet NASA's standards, and actually compete with SpaceX.
High-risk, high-reward situation.
Exactly. If they succeed, great. But if they fail, it could be a disaster for them.
So 3 different paths, each with its own pros and cons. It's a lot to wrap our heads around. But before we try to predict the future, let's zoom out for a second and think about the bigger picture.
Good idea. This isn't just about Boeing or SpaceX. This is about the future of space exploration, the role of private companies in space, and how we balance competition and collaboration.
Big questions, big implications. We need to understand the context to really grasp what's at stake here. All right, so we spent a lot of time talking about Boeing, Starliner, the technical issues, the money pit it's become, and of course the SpaceX rivalry. But now I want to zoom out, look at the bigger picture. What does all of this mean for space exploration as a whole?
Well, this whole situation has really thrown a wrench into NASA's grand plan for a commercial spaceflight. They envision this dynamic industry, with Boeing and SpaceX duking it out.
Competition breeds innovation, right? That was the thinking. But now, with Boeing struggling, we're facing a possible SpaceX monopoly.
We are, and that raises some concerns.
Definitely. I mean, SpaceX has done amazing things, don't get me wrong. Landing rockets on drone ships, that's insane.
It is pretty mind-blowing.
But what happens if they're the only game in town? Does that stifle innovation down the line?
It's a valid concern. Without that competitive pressure, will they be as motivated to push the boundaries, to come up with new ideas?
And there's the price tag, too. If SpaceX have all the leverage, they could jack up the prices for NASA, right?
They could. And remember, that's taxpayer money we're talking about.
Right. It's not just about rockets and spaceships. It's about being responsible with public funds.
Absolutely. So even if SpaceX stays amazing, a lack of competition could hurt NASA's budget and slow down their goals.
So what can NASA do? Are there any ways to prevent a monopoly from taking over?
Well, they could try to nurture other space companies, the smaller ones, with new ideas.
Like creating a minor lead system for space travel.
I like that. And they could also look at different ways of doing contracts, maybe encouraging collaboration or demanding more transparency on costs.
So instead of just saying, here's a blank check, build us a spaceship, they could set up a system that keeps things competitive and affordable.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between supporting private companies and protecting the public's interest.
Makes sense. But it's not just about money either, is it? We've got to think about safety, too. Putting all our eggs in one basket, even if it's a SpaceX basket, feels risky.
It is risky. What if SpaceX has a major setback? A big accident?
Right now, there's no backup plan if something happens to their Dragon capsule.
And that's a huge vulnerability. It highlights why having redundancy is so important.
Even if Boeing gets Starliner working perfectly, having two reliable options is crucial. It's like having a spare tire. You hope you never need it, but you're sure glad it's there when you do.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I think that's a big lesson from all of this. Space travel is inherently dangerous. We can't put all our eggs in one basket.
We need multiple spacecraft, different launch providers, international partnerships, whatever it takes to spread the risk.
Totally agree. But there's something else to remember, too. There's a human side to all of this. People have poured their hearts into Starliner.
The engineers, the technicians, they've all dedicated themselves to this dream.
And even if Starliner fails, their knowledge and passion can be used for other projects to advance space exploration in different ways.
It's a reminder that even with setbacks, the spirit of exploration keeps going. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm feeling a mix of emotions, awe at how ambitious and complex all of this is, but also a cautious optimism about the future.
I get it, spaceflight is hard, but it's also a testament to human ingenuity and our drive to explore. And as for the future,
Yeah.
well, that's still being written with every launch, every mission, every new discovery.
Well said. And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has shed some light on the challenges and opportunities facing the space industry. It's a story that's far from over. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep looking up.